Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from Wise, Witty and Weird. Glad that you could be with me, and I haven't made many videos lately only because I've been too busy, and I think I probably use that as an excuse every time I come here to present an idea or a concept. I want to talk about Vietnam suicide today. I noticed here in Australia that we're having an inquiry into the suicide of Vietnam veterans, and I needed to make a comment because I have worked with Vietnam veterans in particular many years ago, and it was no surprise at that stage to know that some of the people that I had come in contact with, weren't working with at the time, had not only been thinking about suicide, but there were some people that completed suicide. I also know from working with these men and their families that the trauma they experienced while in Vietnam, and this applies to any place where there's conflict in the world, I think. And I just want to note that since I was working with Vietnam veterans, where there have been a number of conflicts around the world, whether that be in Afghanistan, Syria, other trouble spots around the world, that the number of veterans who are harmed, who are much younger, obviously, than the Vietnam veterans were, are experiencing the same traumas, the same issues that the Vietnam vets were. And I think it's sad that we hadn't learnt that lesson from the Vietnam veterans. We haven't learnt that war, firstly, is a terrible thing. And the second thing is that the armed services do not understand or comprehend the damage that is done to those fighting those particular wars. Now, when I was working with the veterans, I found out, or discovered, I guess, that it wasn't all about the conflict. It was about a number of things. It was about their training. It was about the fact that they were trained basically to kill, many of them, and that the experience between being trained to do something and experiencing that at the end of the day are two different things. You can imagine what it would be like, but actually experiencing death, and the death of the most horrific nature you could imagine, whether that be through bombing, whether it be through artillery of some description, or whether it be being shot, or whether it be by a roadside bomb. Regardless of how these deaths occur, they are horrific when you've experienced them for the first time. And particularly when you're a young bloke who fantasizes about war and what war might mean, and then you find yourself placed in an area of conflict. And how do you psychologically evaluate your own values, your own belief, your own feelings about life, and be able to and be confronted with not only the threat on your own life, but the damage and the death that others around you might have caused, and in some cases you yourself have caused. There was one particular story I remember which has remained with me to this day, and that is of a veteran who was fighting at Phnom Penh, I think, and it was a bit of a massacre, but the Australians won the battle in the end, and they were clearing up the bodies, and he came upon a Viet Cong and reached inside his pocket and pulled out a photo of this man's wife and child. And it was in that moment that, regardless of what they thought and were taught about the Viet Cong and the way the Viet Cong were demonized by the forces and by politicians, he realized that this man, who was the same age that he was, also with a child, that they were the same. And he wondered at that particular point why it is they were doing what they were doing. That these people were people, and that they were living their lives, and they had loved ones in their lives and children in their lives who they will never get to see, or the children certainly will never get to see their father. And that stayed with him, that moment of compassion for someone he had killed. And I think that there are thousands of those sorts of stories that Vietnam veterans and veterans of other wars can certainly tell. But there's a degree of silence around talking about these events. It's as if no matter what happens to you, you as a soldier are a commodity. You are used to do a task for a political gain. You're not considered to be a human being. You may just be a piece of artillery, a tank, whatever, but you are not. You are not seen as human. And your loss, your life lost, is of no consequence to the generals and the other people that run the military forces, and no severe loss to the politicians, because they will argue that this is the sort of work that you signed up to, and that every one of you should have known what the consequences were likely to be. No one goes into war expecting to die. No one. No one goes in there with aversion as to what it is like until they are partaking of it. So the fact that they're now holding this inquiry, that the government has decided that, well, the amount of suicides that we're experiencing are unacceptable. They've always been unacceptable. The suicide rate amongst Vietnam veterans is horrific. No one seemed to care about it then. Why are they caring about it now? Because suddenly the public's in an uproar over younger people. So the suicide rate always has been high amongst Vietnam veterans, but maybe they were seen as having fought a just war, even though it was far from just. I don't know what the reasons are. But today, an inquiry is being launched into suicide. And they're going to have a look at the way they're trained. Because we know from the Vietnam experience that the training dehumanised not just who the other side were, but also who they are. And that they were told they couldn't talk about whatever happened. They couldn't talk about how they felt about what had happened. And particularly with men, where there's this code of silence around our emotions, it's detrimental to us. It destroys us. It rips us apart. And the thing with my experience was that there were a whole group of people that are around these veterans who experience the horror that they are thinking about and emotionally trying to process as well. And a lot of the men are violent. There's lots of alcohol use and lots of drug use once they leave the service, because they've tried to find ways to deal with it. They try to work through the issues, and they struggle to do so. And people around them don't understand, and struggle also to understand what that's like for them. So they wind up feeling alone and isolated and disenfranchised. So what's the inquiry going to do? It's going to do what we should have done a long time ago. But we're very slow at recognising these problems and finding ways to resolve them. Instead, we just send people back to fight. We're withdrawing from Afghanistan. But will there be another war, another conflict? Will China raid Taiwan, take over the Chinese Sea? Will the Russians pursue their claims to some of those ex-satellite nations? Who knows? Either way, we will probably enter into another conflict of some sort. And again, those that go to fight will be ill-prepared, not to fight, but to deal with the trauma of what they witness. So it's another battle. And I often wonder what will ever come out of an inquiry anyway. Is anybody going to admit fault? Say that they could have done things differently? We don't know. But for any of you that watch this video, I want you to consider that if you know someone who's in service, to listen to them about what they had to say about how they served, where they served, and what their experiences actually were like, and how they processed death and destruction. Thanks to everybody for being with me. Just want to say, take care of yourselves though. Talk to other people around you if you've got things that are worrying you. And more importantly, or above everything else, make sure that you're not only looking after yourself and others, but you're safe. Thanks everybody. Take care. Bye.